Your lungs exchange gases through simple diffusion and don't actually care whether oxygen comes from air or liquid. This isn't science fiction anymore. In 1998, researchers kept premature lambs stable for hours using perfluorocarbon ventilation, proving that lungs can process oxygen dissolved in liquid at concentrations of 35 to 70 milliliters per 100 milliliters of fluid. In 2025, this liquid breathing technology has advanced to the point where the physiological barriers are becoming understood and potentially solvable. While the deepest scuba dive still maxes out at 332 meters and requires 15 hours of decompression, liquid breathing could theoretically eliminate decompression sickness entirely. The question isn't whether the basic physiology works, but what technological and human factors still stand between us and the deep ocean. Yet even as this breakthrough approaches, we remain constrained by limitations that have persisted for decades. The 2025 Deep Sea Challenge. The numbers tell the story of human limitation underwater. Current scuba diving records max out at 332 meters, while saturation diving reaches 701 meters, both achievements that haven't been surpassed in decades. These barriers exist not from lack of courage or equipment, but because physics creates an insurmountable wall when breathing compressed air at extreme depths. Every breath floods the body with compressed gases that create deadly complications during ascent, making deeper exploration impossible with current methods. Meanwhile, industrial operations have pushed far beyond human reach. The Perdido oil field operates under nearly 2,450 meters of ocean, requiring constant maintenance that no human diver can provide. Deep-sea mining operations target polymetallic nodules on abyssal plains at depths exceeding 4,000 meters, where critical rare earth elements essential for renewable energy technology lie scattered across the ocean floor. These operations require precision work that only human hands and judgment can provide, yet they exist in a realm completely inaccessible to human divers. The economic stakes have grown astronomical. Current estimates place the value of untapped deep-sea mineral resources at over $16 trillion, with lithium deposits alone worth enough to power the global transition to renewable energy. Offshore wind farms now extend into waters deeper than 800 meters, requiring constant maintenance and repair work that pushes the boundaries of what remote-operated vehicles can accomplish. Each day that these depths remain inaccessible to human workers costs the industry millions in lost efficiency and delayed projects. Atmospheric diving suits represent the current best attempt to bridge this gap. These mechanical systems maintain internal pressure at 1 atmosphere while protecting the occupant from crushing external forces. However, they weigh over 500 kilograms, move with limited dexterity, and cannot safely operate beyond 600 meters. The bulk prevents access to confined spaces where much critical work must be performed, and suit failure at maximum depth means almost certain death. Remotely operated vehicles have advanced significantly, with AI-enhanced control systems reaching record depths. However, these machines lack the intuitive problem-solving ability that human presence provides. Complex repair work, unexpected equipment failures, and delicate operations still require human judgment and adaptability that no remote system can replicate. The communication delay between surface operators and deep-sea RO creates additional complications, with even minor adjustments taking precious minutes to execute. The gap between human capability and industrial necessity has created a technological bottleneck that threatens to limit humanity's expansion into Earth's final frontier. Ocean mining companies report that the inability to place humans at work in depths costs them an estimated 40% efficiency loss compared to shallow water operations. Maintenance crews struggle with underwater installations that were designed for human servicing but remain perpetually out of reach. Scientific research expeditions miss critical discoveries because certain types of specimen collection and in situ analysis can only be performed by human researchers. The root cause of this limitation isn't the crushing pressure itself, but specifically the act of breathing compressed air under extreme pressure. The human body can theoretically withstand enormous pressures when properly supported, as demonstrated by atmospheric diving suits and submersibles. The problem emerges when humans must breathe gases that become compressed to dangerous densities. Each breath at depth contains exponentially more gas molecules than surface breathing, saturating body tissues with nitrogen and creating the conditions for decompression sickness, nitrogen narcosis, and oxygen toxicity. This realization has led researchers to question a fundamental assumption about human underwater survival. What if the solution isn't better air delivery systems or more sophisticated decompression protocols? What if humans don't need to breathe air at all? The concept challenges every instinct about human survival, but the physiological reality suggests something remarkable about how our respiratory system actually functions. Recent advances in liquid breathing research have moved this concept from theoretical possibility to practical development. Scientists have identified specific liquids that can carry dissolved oxygen and carbon dioxide in concentrations sufficient to support human life. These perfluorocarbon compounds demonstrate the ability to facilitate gas exchange through lung tissue while remaining chemically inert and non-toxic to human physiology. Laboratory tests with animal subjects have proven that mammals can survive extended periods breathing oxygenated liquids, with successful gas exchange occurring throughout the process. The breakthrough potential of liquid breathing technology extends far beyond solving current depth limitations. Liquids are incompressible, meaning a human breathing liquid would experience no pressure differential between their internal and external environment as they descend. The crushing pressure that creates decompression sickness, nitrogen narcosis, and oxygen toxicity will become irrelevant because the breathing medium wouldn't compress or decompress during depth changes. This could theoretically allow humans to descend to any depth where their physical structure could withstand the external pressure. The implications stagger the imagination. Human explorers could potentially reach the deepest ocean trenches, working directly at depths that currently require only the most sophisticated submersibles. Deep-sea mining operations could employ human workers at any depth, revolutionizing underwater industry and making previously impossible projects economically viable. Scientific research could advance exponentially with human researchers able to work directly at the bottom of the ocean, collecting samples and making observations that no remote system could replicate. The technology exists. The principles have been proven in laboratory settings. Yet the concept feels impossible to most people because it challenges the most basic assumption about what breathing means and how human survival works underwater. While your lungs don't care what you breathe, the physiological reality behind this challenge reveals something remarkable about human respiratory function. Your lungs are not air-breathing organs designed specifically for atmospheric gases. They are gas exchange organs that facilitate the transfer of oxygen into your bloodstream and the removal of carbon dioxide from your body. The specific medium delivering these gases is completely irrelevant to the lung tissue itself, as long as the exchange process can occur effectively. The alveoli in your lungs are microscopic sacs that serve as the interface between your respiratory system and your circulatory system. These tiny structures contain walls so thin that gases can pass through them directly into surrounding blood vessels. When you inhale, oxygen crosses these membranes and binds to red blood cells, while carbon dioxide moves in the opposite direction from blood to lung cavity for removal during exhalation. This process depends entirely on concentration gradients and molecular diffusion, not on any special properties of atmospheric air. Each alveolus functions like a biological filter that selectively allows certain molecules to pass through while blocking others. Oxygen molecules are small enough to cross the alveolar membrane and have chemical properties that allow them to bind with hemoglobin and red blood cells. Carbon dioxide molecules can cross in the reverse direction because they exist in higher concentrations in blood than in the lung cavity. The membrane doesn't distinguish between oxygen delivered by air versus oxygen delivered by any other medium, as long as the concentration is sufficient to maintain the necessary gradient for transfer. Think of your lungs like a factory that processes raw materials into finished products. The factory doesn't care whether trucks, trains, or ships deliver the raw materials as long as the materials arrive in the right quantities and quality. Your alveoli function the same way with oxygen delivery. They extract what they need from whatever medium fills the lung space and ignore everything else about that medium. The surrounding infrastructure of airways, bronchi, and respiratory muscles simply moves the medium in and out to facilitate this exchange process. This principle already operates in human development before birth. Fetuses breathe amniotic fluid until birth. Proven lungs work with liquid mediums, not just air. The developing respiratory system functions normally throughout pregnancy with lungs completely filled with fluid. The transition to air breathing only occurs after birth when the liquid is expelled and replaced with atmospheric gases. This demonstrates that human lungs possess inherent capability to handle liquid environments from the earliest stages of development. The amniotic fluid example proves that the alveolar walls can maintain their selective permeability, whether they're in contact with gas or liquid, as long as the liquid contains adequate dissolved oxygen concentrations. This isn't a special adaptation that disappears after birth, but rather a fundamental property of lung tissue that remains throughout life. Most adults never experience this capability because they never encounter situations where breathing liquid becomes necessary or beneficial. Medical research has demonstrated that various other mediums can support gas exchange through lung tissue when properly formulated. Scientists have tested different liquid compounds to determine which ones can carry sufficient oxygen while remaining biocompatible with human physiology. These experiments consistently show that the lungs themselves adapt readily to processing liquid mediums with gas exchange rates that can match or exceed those achieved with atmospheric breathing under certain conditions. The psychological barrier to accepting liquid breathing stems from deeply ingrained survival instincts rather than physiological limitations. Every human learns from infancy that liquid in the lungs means drowning and death, creating powerful mental associations that persist regardless of rational knowledge. This instinctual response makes the concept feel impossible even when presented with scientific evidence of its feasibility. The fear response to liquid-filled lungs exists independently of actual physical danger, creating a mental obstacle that can be more challenging to overcome than the technical aspects of implementation. Evolution programmed humans to associate liquid in airways with mortal danger because throughout most of human history, this association was completely accurate. Water entering the lungs typically meant drowning, so developing strong aversion responses improved survival rates. However, this evolutionary programming doesn't distinguish between harmful liquids like water and potentially beneficial liquids specifically designed to support respiratory function. The panic response activates regardless of the liquid's actual properties or safety profile. Understanding that liquid breathing doesn't require change in lung function helps clarify why the concept works in principle. The respiratory system doesn't need modification or adaptation to process liquid mediums because it already possesses all necessary capabilities. The challenge lies in identifying liquids with appropriate properties for oxygen transport and carbon dioxide removal, not in somehow altering human physiology to accommodate liquid breathing. This distinction is crucial because it means the solution involves engineering better breathing mediums rather than changing human biology. The key breakthrough in liquid breathing research involves finding compounds that can dissolve large quantities of both oxygen and carbon dioxide while remaining safe for prolonged contact with lung tissue. These liquids must maintain stable chemical properties under pressure, resist contamination by body fluids, and avoid toxic effects on respiratory membranes. The liquid essentially needs to function as artificial blood that operates in the lung cavity instead of blood vessels, carrying gases back and forth between alveoli and the external environment. Scientists have been investigating these possibilities for over 50 years, testing various chemical compounds to determine their suitability for respiratory applications. Research efforts accelerated significantly when medical applications emerged for treating severe respiratory diseases. Doctors found that certain liquid ventilation techniques could help patients with damaged lungs by providing more efficient gas exchange than conventional mechanical ventilation. These medical applications provided crucial data about how human lungs respond to liquid breathing under controlled conditions. Current research focuses on perfecting liquid formulations that can support human life while addressing the practical difficulties that have prevented widespread adoption. Scientists have identified specific chemical compounds that show exceptional promise for human liquid breathing applications. The foundation exists for understanding why lungs can process liquid mediums, but the real breakthrough lies in understanding why current breathing methods create such deadly limitations at depth. The pressure problem that kills divers. Compressed air becomes a deadly cocktail when humans breathe it under extreme pressure. Every single breath taken at depth floods the body with exponentially more gas molecules than the same breath would contain at the surface. At 100 meters depth each, breath delivers 10 times more nitrogen and oxygen molecules than surface breathing. At 300 meters, that number jumps to 30 times the normal concentration. This massive influx of compressed gases creates a cascade of physiological problems that become increasingly dangerous as depth increases. 3 core hazards emerge from breathing compressed air at depth: nitrogen narcosis, decompression sickness, and oxygen toxicity. Each driven by pressure. Forced increases in gas partial pressures. Nitrogen narcosis demonstrates how compressed air becomes toxic to human consciousness at relatively shallow depths. Nitrogen normally exists as an inert gas in atmospheric air, making up roughly 78% of every breath without causing any noticeable effects. However, When nitrogen gets compressed under pressure, it begins to act like an anesthetic agent, dissolving into fatty tissues throughout the body and particularly affecting brain cells. Divers typically begin experiencing symptoms around 30 meters depth, where thinking becomes clouded and decision-making abilities deteriorate. By 60 meters, the narcotic effect becomes severe enough to impair motor coordination and judgment. Decompression sickness, known as the bends, presents the most lethal consequence of breathing compressed air at depth. Consider the case of a commercial diver working at 90 meters who experiences rapid ascent due to equipment failure. The nitrogen that dissolved harmlessly in his tissues under pressure suddenly attempts to return to gaseous state as pressure decreases. Instead of being safely eliminated through the lungs, the nitrogen forms bubbles within tissues and blood vessels. These bubbles can block blood flow, causing severe pain in joints and muscles, or form in the spinal cord, causing paralysis. More critically, bubbles can enter the arterial blood system and travel to vital organs, creating arterial gas embolism that proves fatal within minutes. The severity of decompression sickness depends entirely on how much nitrogen has dissolved into body tissues during the dive. Longer dives at greater depths create higher nitrogen saturation levels, requiring correspondingly longer decompression times. Deep saturation dives can require decompression periods lasting several days, with divers making carefully timed stops at specific depths to allow nitrogen to gradually leave their systems without forming dangerous bubbles. Oxygen toxicity creates the third major hazard when breathing compressed air at extreme depths. While oxygen is essential for life, breathing compressed air at depth delivers oxygen at partial pressures far exceeding normal atmospheric levels. At depths beyond 60 meters on regular air, the partial pressure of oxygen reaches levels that become toxic to human physiology. Oxygen toxicity initially affects the central nervous system, causing symptoms ranging from nausea and dizziness to tunnel vision and seizures. At extreme depths, oxygen toxicity can trigger sudden unconsciousness and convulsions that prove fatal underwater. Current technical diving solutions attempt to manage these problems through gas mixture manipulation rather than elimination. Trimix replaces some nitrogen with helium to reduce narcosis effects while limiting oxygen percentage to prevent toxicity. Heliox eliminates nitrogen entirely for the deepest dives, using helium as the inert gas component. These mixed gas approaches allow deeper diving by reducing the severity of each individual hazard, but they cannot eliminate the fundamental problem of breathing compressed gases under pressure. Even the most sophisticated gas mixtures only postpone the inevitable limitations imposed by pressure physics. Helium creates its own narcotic effects at extreme depths, causing high-pressure nervous syndrome that produces tremors, cognitive impairment, and motor dysfunction. Helium also conducts heat much more efficiently than nitrogen, causing rapid body heat loss that limits dive duration. Most importantly, helium must still be decompressed carefully during ascent, often requiring even longer decompression schedules than nitrogen-based breathing mixtures. Saturation diving represents the ultimate expression of current compressed air technology, yet even this approach cannot overcome the fundamental physics involved. Saturation divers live in pressurized chambers for weeks at a time, allowing their tissues to become completely saturated with breathing gas so that no additional gas absorption occurs during working dives. This eliminates the need for decompression between individual dives, but requires a massive decompression process lasting several days when the saturation period ends. The technique allows extended work at depth, but still cannot safely exceed the 701-meter record established decades ago. The core issue remains that all current diving technologies require humans to breathe gases that compress under pressure. Whether using air, trimix, heliox, or exotic, gas mixtures, the fundamental physics of gas compression creates unavoidable physiological hazards that worsen with increasing depth. These aren't engineering problems that can be solved through better equipment or improved techniques, but rather fundamental limitations imposed by the behavior of gases under pressure. Liquids behave completely differently under pressure than gases, remaining essentially incompressible regardless of depth. However, liquid breathing faces its own formidable challenge that has prevented practical implementation. Perfluorocarbon density measures approximately 1.9 grams per milliliter compared to air's 1.2 milligrams per milliliter. Moving liquid through a 6-liter lung capacity requires displacing roughly 12 kilograms per breath. No human respiratory muscle can sustain a 12-kilogram tidal load, even at rest, let alone during exertion. Early animal experiments with liquid ventilation consistently demonstrated this limitation. Test subjects died of carbon dioxide buildup because their respiratory muscles couldn't maintain adequate liquid circulation for gas exchange. The animals could absorb oxygen from the perfluorocarbon liquid, but couldn't exhale carbon dioxide efficiently enough to prevent fatal accumulation. This mechanical limitation makes clear that liquid breathing requires external assistance rather than relying on natural respiratory muscle function. Despite these mechanical challenges, incompressible property of liquids means liquid breathing could theoretically eliminate all three major diving hazards simultaneously while allowing humans to reach previously impossible depths. The question becomes whether technology can overcome the physical limitations that have prevented liquid breathing from moving beyond laboratory experiments. Economic pressure to solve this problem has never been greater, as industries worldwide face mounting costs from humanity's inability to work at the depths. The 2025 resources and infrastructure now exist. The underwater economy has exploded into a multi-trillion-dollar sector that demands human presence at depths far beyond current diving capabilities. Deep-sea mining operations target the most valuable resource deposits on Earth, scattered across abyssal ocean floors at depths ranging from 3,000 to 6,000 meters, completely inaccessible to human workers using current technology. The numbers driving this underwater gold rush are staggering. According to 2025 Deloitte analysis, cobalt demand could exceed currently known land-based reserves by 423% by 2050, with similar shortages projected for nickel and lithium. These minerals are essential for batteries, renewable energy systems, and advanced electronics that power the modern economy. The solution lies in massive polymetallic nodule fields in international waters that contain more cobalt than all terrestrial mines combined. These potato-sized formations carpet vast areas of the Pacific Ocean floor, formed over millions of years through complex geological processes. The nodules contain not only cobalt, but also nickel, copper, and rare earth elements that are becoming increasingly scarce on land. Mining these deposits requires precision extraction techniques that can separate valuable materials from seafloor sediments without causing excessive environmental damage. Current remotely operated vehicles lack the dexterity and real-time decision-making ability needed for efficient nodule collection at these depths. Companies like Deep Green Metals and Global Sea Mineral Resources have invested billions in developing extraction technology for depths that exceed human diving limits by factors of 10 or more. These operations require constant maintenance, equipment adjustments, and quality control measures that are extremely difficult to accomplish using remote systems alone. The nascent deep-sea mining industry involves various sectors, including dredging companies and offshore drilling contractors, with traditional mining companies expected to become involved as well. Offshore renewable energy installations are pushing into deeper waters as coastal areas become saturated with existing wind farms. Floating wind turbines now operate in waters exceeding 800 meters depth, requiring regular inspection, maintenance, and repair work that becomes exponentially more challenging as water depth increases. These installations need constant human oversight for complex maintenance procedures that automated systems cannot handle effectively, yet they exist far beyond the reach of current diving technology. Remotely operated vehicles represent the current state of the art for deep-sea industrial work, but their limitations become more apparent as operational depths increase. IEEE and deep studies confirm that ROVs operating at 6,000 meters depth still lack fine manipulation capabilities essential for precision work. The most advanced systems suffer from communication delays, limited manipulator dexterity, and inability to adapt to unexpected situations. Tether ROVs require constant connection to surface vessels, creating logistical complications and weather dependencies that can halt operation for days or weeks. Video feeds from underwater cameras suffer from limited visibility, color distortion, and perspective problems that make fine manipulation extremely difficult. Haptic feedback systems attempt to provide tactile sensations for ROV operators, but current technology cannot replicate the sensitivity and adaptability of human hands. ROV operators require extensive training to perform even basic tasks, and the learning curve for complex operations can take months or years to master. Climate change research demands human presence at depths where critical oceanographic processes occur, but remain largely inaccessible to direct human observation. Deep water coral ecosystems exist at depths between 1,000 and 4,000 meters, harboring biodiversity that scientists are only beginning to understand. These environments require careful sample collection, in situ experimentation, and real-time observation that remote systems cannot provide with sufficient precision. Ancient shipwrecks in the Mediterranean Sea lie at depths exceeding 1,500 meters, containing artifacts that could revolutionize understanding of historical trade routes and cultural exchange. Underwater archaeological sites need careful documentation and preservation techniques that require human judgment and adaptability. Remote systems often cause damage to delicate artifacts through imprecise manipulation or inadequate environmental control during recovery operations. The economic cost of current depth limitations creates massive inefficiencies across multiple industries. Deep-sea mining operations lose an estimated 60% of potential efficiency because human workers cannot access extraction sites directly. Offshore energy companies spend billions annually on specialized equipment and extended operational timelines caused by the inability to place human technicians at work in depths. Scientific research expeditions miss critical discoveries because certain types of investigation require human presence that current technology cannot provide. Insurance costs for deep water operations reflect the risk and limitations of current technology. Companies pay premium rates for specialized vessels, extended operational windows, and backup systems required when human workers cannot access operational sites. Equipment failure rates increase significantly in deep water environments, partly because remote systems cannot perform the preventive maintenance and real-time adjustments that human technicians provide in shallow water operations. Multiple industries are now funding liquid-breathing research, recognizing that this technology represents the key to unlocking deep ocean economic potential. Mining companies, energy corporations, and research institutions have formed consortiums to accelerate development of practical liquid-breathing systems. Government agencies responsible for ocean resource management are providing additional funding for research that could transform underwater industries. The convergence of economic necessity, technological possibility, and institutional support makes 2025 a turning point where liquid breathing transitions from laboratory curiosity to industrial imperative. The race to develop working liquid breathing technology has intensified because the first companies to achieve practical implementation will gain enormous competitive advantages in accessing deep ocean resources that remain completely inaccessible to competitors using conventional diving technology. The solution may lie in a class of synthetic compounds that have already proven their ability to support mammalian life in laboratory settings, compounds that could finally bridge the gap between human capability and industrial necessity at any ocean depth. The liquid that could change everything. Perfluorocarbons represent the specific breakthrough compounds that could make human liquid breathing a reality. These synthetic liquids are created by replacing hydrogen atoms in hydrocarbon molecules with fluorine atoms, resulting in clear, odorless compounds with extraordinary respiratory properties. The carbon-fluorine bonds create molecules that are completely chemically inert, meaning they won't react with human tissue, blood, or biological compounds they encounter in the body. This chemical stability makes PFCs safe for direct contact with lung tissue over extended periods. The gas carrying capacity of perfluorocarbons far exceeds that of blood or water. Oxygen dissolves in PFCs at concentrations of 35 to 70 milliliters per 100 milliliters of liquid, while carbon dioxide solubility reaches 140 to 166 milliliters per 100 milliliters. These solubility properties mean that relatively small volumes of PFC can transport the oxygen and carbon dioxide quantities necessary to sustain human life. A lungful of properly oxygenated PFC contains enough dissolved oxygen to meet metabolic demands while providing adequate carbon dioxide removal capacity. Surface tension properties of perfluorocarbons solve another critical challenge in liquid breathing applications. PFCs have surface tension roughly 25% that of water, which prevents alveolar collapse during liquid breathing. When lungs fill with liquid, the surface tension between the liquid and alveolar walls determines whether these microscopic air sacs maintain their shape or collapse under pressure. Water's high surface tension would cause widespread alveolar collapse, making gas exchange impossible. The low surface tension of PFCs allows alveoli to remain open and functional, even when completely filled with liquid. The concept gained scientific credibility through 1966 Navy experiments where mice survived breathing PFC at high pressures, proving that mammalian respiratory systems could function with liquid mediums. These early demonstrations showed that the physiological principles underlying liquid breathing were sound and that PFCs could sustain life through respiratory gas exchange. The elimination of pressure-related diving hazard through PFC liquid breathing stems from the fundamental incompressibility of liquids compared to gases. When a diver's lungs contain compressed air, descent to greater depths forces more gas molecules into the lung space, creating dangerous partial pressure increases that cause nitrogen narcosis, oxygen toxicity, and tissue gas saturation, leading to decompression sickness. Liquid-filled lungs experience none of these pressure-related changes because liquids cannot be compressed regardless of external pressure. A diver breathing PFCs will descend to extreme depths without experiencing any internal pressure differential between their lungs and the surrounding water. The PFC liquid would maintain constant density and molecular concentration throughout the dive, delivering steady oxygen concentrations to the alveoli regardless of depth. This eliminates nitrogen narcosis entirely because PFCs contain no nitrogen compounds that could cause narcotic effects. Oxygen toxicity becomes impossible because the oxygen concentration in the PFC remains constant rather than increasing with depth as occurs with compressed air breathing. Decompression sickness disappears as a concern because tissue nitrogen saturation cannot occur when breathing PFCs. The body would absorb no excess nitrogen during the dive since PFCs contain no nitrogen compounds. Without nitrogen absorption, no nitrogen bubbles can form during ascent, eliminating the need for decompression stops regardless of dive duration or maximum depth reached. Divers could theoretically descend to any depth and return to the surface immediately without risk of decompression injury. The theoretical depth capabilities unlocked by PFC liquid breathing extend far beyond current human diving limits. Where atmospheric diving suits max out around 600 meters and saturation diving reaches 701 meters, liquid breathing could potentially allow humans to descend to the deepest ocean trenches. The Mariana Trench's deepest point at nearly 11,000 meters could become accessible to human explorers breathing PFCs, limited only by the structural integrity of the human body under extreme pressure rather than respiratory physiology constraints. Medical applications of PFC liquid breathing are advancing rapidly in 2025, providing crucial real-world data about human compatibility with these compounds. Premature infants with underdeveloped lungs receive PFC liquid ventilation to help transition from the liquid environment of the womb to air breathing. The technique has shown remarkable success in supporting babies whose lungs cannot yet function effectively with conventional gas ventilation. Adult patients with severe lung injuries also benefit from PFC liquid ventilation when traditional mechanical ventilation fails to provide adequate gas exchange. Drug delivery applications represent another growing medical use for PFC liquid breathing systems. Patients with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and cystic fibrosis receive medications delivered directly through PFC liquid ventilation, allowing drugs to reach diseased lung tissue more effectively than conventional delivery methods. These medical applications are driving rapid improvements in PFC formulations and liquid breathing equipment design. Laboratory demonstrations have proven that liquid breathing with PFCs works in controlled settings. Animal experiments have shown successful survival and gas exchange in mammals breathing oxygenated PFCs for extended periods. These studies demonstrate that the physiological principles underlying liquid breathing are sound and that PFCs can sustain life through respiratory gas exchange. The concept has moved far beyond theoretical speculation into documented scientific reality. The progression from medical applications to diving applications faces significant technical challenges despite proven feasibility. Laboratory conditions provide careful control over PFC temperature, oxygenation levels, and delivery systems that would be difficult to maintain in underwater environments. The transition from brief medical procedures to extended underwater operations requires solving problems related to PFC storage, real-time oxygenation, and emergency backup systems. Despite these implementation challenges, the fundamental breakthrough of PFC liquid breathing has moved from laboratory curiosity to engineering problem. The question has shifted from whether liquid breathing can work to how quickly practical systems can be developed for real-world applications. However, even with perfect PFC chemistry and proven gas exchange capabilities, one critical physical limitation threatens to make liquid breathing impossible to implement in practice. The breathing challenge no one talks about. The density of perfluorocarbons creates a massive physical burden that human respiratory muscles simply cannot handle effectively. PFCs range from 1.58 to 2.0 grams per milliliter compared to water's single gram per milliliter, making them nearly twice as dense as water. When lungs fill with PFC liquid instead of air, the diaphragm and intercostal muscles must work exponentially harder to move this dense medium in and out of the respiratory system. The mathematics behind this challenge reveal the true scope of the problem. The average adult male has a lung capacity of approximately 6 liters, and with PFCs averaging 1.9 grams per milliliter density, each full breath would require moving roughly 12 kilograms of liquid mass. To put this in perspective, breathing PFC liquid means your diaphragm must push and pull the equivalent weight of a car battery with every single inhalation and exhalation. Human respiratory muscles evolved specifically to move lightweight gases that weigh mere grams per breath, not dense liquids that weigh kilograms. This extreme physical workload creates immediate problems even during rest conditions. The diaphragm, intercostal muscles, and accessory breathing muscles must generate forces far beyond their normal operating parameters just to achieve basic ventilation. During physical exertion, when oxygen demands increase and breathing rate must accelerate, the muscular effort required becomes overwhelming. The energy cost of breathing itself begins consuming a significant portion of the body's total oxygen supply, creating a downward spiral where breathing becomes progressively more difficult as oxygen debt accumulates. The density problem compounds exponentially during any form of underwater work or emergency situations. Activities that require increased oxygen consumption, such as swimming, equipment manipulation, or stress responses, demand faster and deeper breathing patterns. With PFC liquid breathing, these increased ventilation demands translate into crushing physical workloads that quickly exceed human muscular capabilities. What should be routine underwater tasks become impossible when the act of breathing itself requires maximum physical effort. Carbon dioxide removal presents an even more critical challenge than oxygen delivery in PFC liquid breathing systems. While PFCs can dissolve substantial quantities of both oxygen and carbon dioxide, the density of the liquid severely impairs the lungs' ability to effectively expel CO2-laden PFC during exhalation. The heavy liquid requires tremendous muscular force to push out of the alveolar spaces where carbon dioxide has accumulated. Incomplete exhalation means that carbon dioxide-rich PFC remains in the lungs, mixing with fresh oxygenated PFC during the next inhalation cycle. This inadequate carbon dioxide removal leads to a dangerous condition called respiratory acidosis, where CO2 levels in the blood rise to toxic concentrations. Carbon dioxide dissolves in blood to form carbonic acid, and when the lungs cannot remove CO2 fast enough, blood pH drops to life-threatening levels. Respiratory acidosis causes confusion, drowsiness, and eventually unconsciousness and death. The condition develops rapidly because the dense PFC liquid prevents the normal rapid gas exchange that keeps blood chemistry balanced. Early animal experiments with liquid breathing revealed that carbon dioxide retention, not oxygen deficiency, was the primary cause of death in test subjects. Researchers found that animals could successfully extract oxygen from PFC liquids, but the physical limitations of breathing dense liquid prevented adequate CO2 removal. The animals essentially suffocated on their own carbon dioxide despite having access to oxygen-rich breathing medium. These experimental failures highlighted that solving liquid breathing requires addressing the mechanical challenges of dense liquid ventilation, not just the chemical challenges of gas solubility. The physiological stress of breathing dense liquid creates cascading problems throughout multiple body systems. Increased respiratory effort elevates heart rate and blood pressure as the cardiovascular system works harder to support the extraordinary muscular demands of liquid breathing. The sympathetic nervous system activates stress responses that increase oxygen consumption while simultaneously making breathing more difficult. Muscle fatigue in respiratory muscles leads to progressively shallower breathing, further compromising gas exchange efficiency. Exertion becomes virtually impossible when fighting against liquid density in the respiratory system. Simple underwater tasks that require mild physical effort become exhausting when combined with the massive energy cost of breathing PFC liquid. Emergency responses that depend on rapid movement or increased activity levels become dangerous because the breathing system cannot support increased metabolic demands. The safety implications are severe because divers might find themselves unable to respond effectively to underwater emergencies due to respiratory limitations. The temperature effects of dense liquid breathing add another layer of complexity to the density problem. PFCs conduct heat much more efficiently than air, causing rapid body heat loss when large volumes of liquid circulate through the lungs. The body must work harder to maintain core temperature while simultaneously struggling with the mechanical demands of liquid ventilation. Cold stress increases oxygen consumption and respiratory effort, creating additional burden on already overworked breathing muscles. Recovery from liquid breathing presents unique challenges related to density and fluid dynamics. Transitioning from PFC liquid back to air breathing requires completely clearing dense liquid from the respiratory system, process that demands significant muscular effort and time. The heavy liquid tends to pool in lower lung regions due to gravity, making complete evacuation difficult without mechanical assistance. Incomplete liquid removal can cause breathing difficulties and potential aspiration problems during the transition period. Engineers working on 2025 liquid breathing systems recognize that mechanical assistance is essential to overcome the density limitations that biology cannot handle. Current research focuses on developing external chest compression devices that can mechanically force PFC liquid in and out of the lungs, essentially replacing the function of respiratory muscles with mechanical pumps. These systems use double piston pumps that rhythmically squeeze and release the thoracic cavity, creating artificial breathing cycles that move dense liquid more effectively than natural muscle action. Artificial gill systems represent another technological approach, originally proposed in U.S. Patent 8,631,788 that would bypass lung ventilation entirely by handling gas exchange through external mechanical systems. The approach eliminates the need to move dense liquid through lungs, but introduces significant engineering complexity. System failures underwater are fatal, underscoring the need for ironclad reliability in any mechanical breathing assistance technology. The fundamental challenge remains that human physiology evolved for gas breathing, and mechanical solutions must compensate for the enormous physical demands that dense liquid breathing places on the human body. These technological approaches are advancing rapidly, but they require sophisticated engineering to address the life or death reliability that sounds like torture. The engineering solutions required to overcome liquid density limitations transform diving into a medical procedure that resembles intensive care more than underwater exploration. Current prototype systems use external chest compression devices that rhythmically squeeze and release the thoracic cavity to force dense perfluorocarbon liquid in and out of the lungs. These mechanical ventilators employ pneumatic actuators and computerized control systems to create artificial breathing cycles because human respiratory muscles cannot generate sufficient force to move the heavy liquid effectively. The compression plates attach to the chest and back, creating a wearable ventilation system that essentially breathes for the diver by mechanically manipulating the ribcage. The chest compression mechanism operates through precisely timed pressure cycles that mimic natural breathing patterns but with forces far exceeding human muscular capability. Pneumatic pumps generate the pressure needed to compress the chest cavity and force liquid out of the lungs during artificial exhalation. Spring-loaded mechanisms then allow chest expansion while vacuum systems help draw fresh oxygenated liquid into the lungs during artificial inhalation. The entire process requires constant mechanical assistance because the density of perfluorocarbon liquid makes unassisted breathing virtually impossible for extended periods. Artificial gill systems represent the other critical component, addressing carbon dioxide removal through direct blood gas exchange. These devices connect to the diver's circulatory system through catheters inserted into major blood vessels, typically the femoral vein for blood extraction and the femoral artery for blood return. The artificial gill removes CO2-laden blood from the body, circulates it through external chemical scrubbing chambers containing soda-lime compounds that absorb carbon dioxide, and returns the clean blood to the circulatory system. This approach bypasses the lungs entirely for carbon dioxide removal, eliminating the primary cause of failure in liquid breathing attempts. The catheter connections required for artificial gill systems introduce significant medical complexity to liquid breathing operations. Large bore catheters must be surgically inserted into major blood vessels before each dive, creating direct pathways between the external environment and the circulatory system. These vascular connections allow substantial blood flow rates necessary for effective gas exchange, but also create potential entry points for infection, air embolism, or massive bleeding if damaged. The catheters require specialized surgical insertion techniques and sterile maintenance procedures that transform diving preparation into a medical procedure requiring trained surgical staff. Blood circulation through external artificial gill systems requires sophisticated pumping mechanisms that maintain precise flow rates and pressure differentials. The pumps must generate enough pressure to overcome vascular resistance while avoiding pressure levels that could damage red blood cells or cause hemolysis. Flow rate calculations become critical because insufficient circulation leads to carbon dioxide buildup, while excessive flow rates can cause cardiovascular stress or blood cell damage. The artificial gill chambers must process several liters of blood per minute to match the carbon dioxide removal rates achieved by healthy lungs. Chemical scrubbing systems within artificial gills use soda-lime compounds that react with dissolved carbon dioxide to form calcium carbonate and water. These chemical reactions are irreversible, meaning the scrubbing material gradually becomes saturated and loses effectiveness over time. Extended dives require multiple scrubbing canisters that can be switched out during operation, or continuous regeneration systems that restore scrubbing capacity through chemical processing. The chemical scrubbing process also generates heat that must be dissipated to prevent blood temperature elevation during circulation through the artificial gill system. Power requirements for mechanical liquid breathing systems exceed anything available in current diving equipment. The chest compression devices require substantial electrical and pneumatic power to generate forces needed for liquid ventilation. Artificial gill pumps demand continuous high power operation to maintain blood circulation rates. Control computers and monitoring systems add additional power demands that quickly exceed the capacity of portable battery systems. Current prototypes require tether connections to surface power supplies, limiting operational range and creating additional safety dependencies. System redundancy becomes critically important because any component failure results in immediate death underwater. The chest compression system requires backup actuators, emergency power supplies, and manual override mechanisms that allow surface support teams to maintain artificial breathing if primary systems fail. Artificial gill systems need duplicate pumps, multiple scrubbing chambers, and emergency blood circulation pathways that can maintain gas exchange during equipment malfunctions. The complexity of providing complete backup systems for every critical component creates mechanical breathing apparatus that weighs hundreds of kilograms and requires multiple support technicians. Safety protocols for mechanical liquid breathing operations resemble surgical procedures more than traditional diving preparations. Medical teams must monitor blood chemistry, cardiovascular function, and respiratory gas exchange throughout the entire diving operation. Emergency medical equipment, including blood transfusion supplies, surgical instruments, and resuscitation equipment, must remain immediately available at the dive site. The requirement for continuous medical supervision and emergency medical capabilities makes mechanical liquid breathing operations logistically complex and extremely expensive. Current testing protocols focus on controlled laboratory environments with extensive medical monitoring and immediate emergency response capabilities. Test subjects undergo comprehensive medical evaluation before participating in trials, including cardiovascular stress testing, blood chemistry analysis, and psychological evaluation. The testing progression starts with brief liquid breathing periods measured in minutes, gradually extending duration as subjects adapt to mechanical ventilation. Medical teams monitor blood oxygen levels, carbon dioxide concentrations, cardiovascular function, and neurological responses throughout each test session. Early human trials have achieved limited success but revealed significant challenges that remain unsolved. Test subjects successfully breathe perfluorocarbon liquid for periods ranging from 15 minutes to several hours using mechanical ventilation assistance. However, several test subjects developed respiratory complications including pneumonia after incomplete liquid removal from the lungs. The transition between liquid breathing and normal air breathing requires careful medical supervision and extended recovery periods. Equipment malfunction scenarios present catastrophic risks that make mechanical liquid breathing extremely dangerous in operational diving conditions. Chest compression system failures would leave divers unable to breathe the dense liquid filling their lungs, causing immediate suffocation underwater. Artificial gill system malfunctions could cause rapid carbon dioxide poisoning or blood circulation problems that lead to unconsciousness and death. Unlike conventional diving equipment failures that might allow emergency ascent to the surface, mechanical breathing system failures offer no recovery options because the diver cannot survive without continuous mechanical life support. Current prototype limitations restrict mechanical liquid breathing to very short duration tests under carefully controlled conditions with immediate medical support. The technology remains years away from practical diving applications that could support real underwater work operations. While the mechanical approach has proven that liquid breathing can work with sufficient technological assistance, the complexity and risk factors make it unsuitable for routine diving operations where equipment reliability and operational simplicity are essential for safety. Yet, even if engineers solve every technical challenge and create perfectly reliable mechanical breathing systems, they still face an obstacle that no amount of technology can overcome. The psychological barrier that stops everyone. The drowning reflex activates the moment liquid enters human lungs, regardless of rational knowledge about oxygen content or safety profiles. Every test volunteer panics despite medical assurances that the perfluorocarbon contains adequate dissolved oxygen to sustain life. Medical studies consistently document this response across all participants, showing that intellectual understanding provides no protection against the overwhelming terror that liquid-filled lungs trigger. The brain interprets any liquid in the respiratory system as drowning and launches survival responses that have kept humans alive for millions of years. The panic begins before liquid even reaches the lungs. Test subjects experience elevated heart rate, sweating, and anxiety symptoms simply when presented with breathing apparatus designed to deliver liquid to their respiratory system. Anticipation of voluntarily allowing liquid into the lungs creates measurable stress responses, including elevated cortisol levels and increased blood pressure. Some participants begin hyperventilating during preparation phases, making the actual liquid breathing transition even more psychologically traumatic when it occurs. When liquid first enters the airways, the body responds with desperate attempts to expel the foreign substance through coughing and gagging reflexes. These reflexes evolved specifically to prevent liquid from entering the lungs, and they activate automatically regardless of conscious intent to cooperate with liquid breathing procedures. The coughing response becomes particularly problematic because it interferes with the controlled liquid delivery necessary for successful gas exchange. Subjects often fight against the liquid breathing apparatus, creating dangerous situations where partial liquid filling occurs without complete lung saturation. The sensation of liquid-filled lungs triggers claustrophobia even in people who have never experienced claustrophobic responses before. Participants describe feeling trapped inside their own bodies, unable to breathe normally, yet unable to escape the liquid breathing system without external assistance. This trapped feeling intensifies when subjects realize they cannot simply hold their breath and wait for the procedure to end. The liquid must be actively circulated to the lungs for gas exchange to occur, meaning subjects must psychologically accept the drowning sensation for extended periods. The evolutionary basis for this response stems from millions of years of natural selection that favored individuals with strong drowning avoidance instincts. Humans who possess weaker drowning responses were more likely to die in water-related accidents, removing their genes from the population over countless generations. The modern result is a species with extremely strong, hardwired responses against liquid in the respiratory system. These responses served our ancestors well for survival purposes, but they now create barriers to technological advances that could expand human capabilities. Interestingly, humans actually begin life breathing liquid rather than air. Fetuses develop an amniotic fluid and their lungs remain filled with liquid throughout pregnancy. The respiratory system functions normally in this liquid environment, proving that human lungs possess inherent capability to handle liquid mediums. The transition to air breathing only occurs at birth when the liquid is expelled and replaced with atmospheric gases. This demonstrates that the drowning reflex is learned rather than innate, developing as a protective mechanism after birth, when liquid in the lungs becomes associated with danger. Despite this natural precedent, psychological conditioning programs struggle to help adults overcome their acquired drowning responses. Training protocols resemble exposure therapy programs used for severe anxiety disorders, beginning with brief liquid exposure sessions measured in seconds and gradually building tolerance for longer periods. The training starts with liquid contact on skin and face, then progresses to partial airway liquid exposure before attempting full lung liquid breathing. Researchers use meditation, controlled breathing exercises, and cognitive behavioral therapy to help subjects manage panic responses during liquid breathing procedures. Medical training provides them insight into overcoming deeply embedded psychological barriers. Surgeons learn to cut into human bodies despite powerful instincts against causing harm to other people. Pilots overcome natural fear responses to heights and speed through systematic training programs. Emergency responders develop ability to function effectively in situations that would paralyze most people with terror. These examples suggest that intensive conditioning can override some survival instincts, but liquid breathing presents unique challenges because the fear response operates during the actual procedure rather than in preparation for it. Despite months of conditioning and sophisticated training approaches, most candidates cannot tolerate full lung liquid exposure for extended periods. Success rates remain low because the fear response operates at a deeper neurological level than conscious control can easily override. Even test subjects who successfully complete liquid breathing sessions report ongoing psychological distress related to the experience. Many describe recurring nightmares about drowning or being unable to breathe normally. Some develop lasting anxiety responses to water or enclosed spaces following liquid breathing experiments. Medical personnel conducting liquid breathing research must carefully screen participants for psychological stability and provide extensive psychological support throughout the experimental process. Subjects undergo psychological evaluation before participation to identify those with existing anxiety disorders or trauma histories that could make liquid breathing particularly traumatic. Continuous psychological monitoring during experiments helps identify subjects who are becoming overwhelmed before panic responses reach dangerous levels. Post-procedure psychological debriefing helps participants process the experience and identify any lasting psychological effects. The psychological barrier may prove more insurmountable than any technological challenge in developing practical liquid breathing systems. Engineers can solve mechanical problems related to liquid density, equipment complexity, and safety redundancy through technological innovation. However, no amount of technological advancement can eliminate the fundamental human psychological response to liquid-filled lungs. This suggests that successful liquid breathing implementation might require selecting and training individuals with unusual psychological profiles rather than adapting the technology to work with typical human psychology. The fundamental challenge remains that liquid breathing requires humans to voluntarily experience what feels exactly like drowning while trusting that technology will prevent actual death. This psychological requirement may represent an evolutionary barrier that cannot be overcome through training or conditioning for most people. Yet while the drowning reflex continues to block diving applications, liquid breathing technology has found success in environments where the psychological barriers matter less than the life-saving potential. Where liquid breathing actually works today, medical facilities worldwide demonstrate that liquid breathing works reliably when lives depend on it. Neonatal intensive care units routinely use perfluorocarbon liquid ventilation to treat premature babies whose underdeveloped lungs cannot function with conventional air ventilation. These medical successes prove that humans can survive and thrive while breathing liquid, eliminating any doubt about the basic physiological feasibility of liquid breathing technology. Premature infants born before 34 weeks gestation often lack sufficient surfactant production in their lungs to prevent alveolar collapse during air breathing. Surfactant is a chemical compound that reduces surface tension in the alveoli, allowing these microscopic air sacs to remain open during the breathing cycle. Without adequate surfactant, attempted air breathing causes widespread alveolar collapse that prevents effective gas exchange and can lead to respiratory failure and death. Traditional mechanical ventilation with air or oxygen often causes additional lung damage in these fragile patients because the pressure required to inflate collapsed alveoli can rupture delicate lung tissue. Perfluorocarbon liquid ventilation solves this problem by eliminating surface tension effects entirely. When premature infant lungs fill with PFC liquid instead of air, the alveoli remain naturally open because liquids do not create surface tension interfaces like gases do. The PFCs act as temporary artificial surfactant, providing mechanical support for proper lung expansion while allowing normal gas exchange to occur through dissolved oxygen and carbon dioxide in the liquid medium. This approach allows premature lungs to function effectively while natural surfactant production develops over time. Clinical results from premature infant liquid ventilation show remarkable success rates that exceed conventional mechanical ventilation outcomes. A key study involving 13 infants with severe respiratory distress syndrome demonstrated improved lung compliance and oxygenation in cases where air ventilation had failed completely. Babies treated with PFC liquid ventilation demonstrate reduced lung inflammation and faster overall recovery compared to those receiving standard air ventilation therapy. The liquid breathing treatment allows these vulnerable patients to survive the critical early weeks when their lungs are too immature for air breathing, providing time for natural lung development to progress to the point where conventional ventilation becomes possible. The transition process from liquid breathing back to air breathing occurs gradually as premature infant lungs mature and begin producing adequate surfactant. Medical teams slowly reduce PFC liquid volume while increasing air ventilation support, allowing babies to adapt progressively to conventional breathing. This transition typically takes several days or weeks depending on the degree of prematurity and individual lung development rates. The gradual changeover prevents the shock that would occur from sudden transition between liquid and gas-breathing environments. Adult patients with severe lung injuries also benefit from liquid ventilation when conventional treatments fail to provide adequate gas exchange. Acute respiratory distress syndrome can damage lung tissue so extensively that air ventilation cannot deliver sufficient oxygen to maintain life. In these cases, PFC liquid ventilation provides superior gas exchange efficiency because the high oxygen solubility in perfluorocarbons delivers more oxygen per unit volume than compressed air ventilation. The FDA granted fast-track designation to perfluorocarbon, a specific perfluorocarbon compound designed for medical liquid ventilation applications. This designation recognizes the life-saving potential of liquid breathing technology and accelerates the regulatory approval process for clinical use. Clinical trials demonstrated that perfluorocarbon used with conventional ventilators improved patient outcomes compared to air ventilation alone, though the FDA ultimately did not approve the treatment because it was not superior to high-frequency oscillating ventilation techniques. Medical research drives liquid breathing innovation at a pace far exceeding diving applications because patient lives depend on immediate solutions rather than future exploration capabilities. Hospital demand for effective treatments creates funding streams and research priorities that advance liquid breathing technology much faster than speculative underwater applications. Every improvement in medical liquid ventilation equipment, PFC formulations, and treatment protocols directly benefits potential diving applications by solving fundamental technical challenges. Advanced PFC formulations developed for medical applications address many problems that would affect diving implementations. Medical researchers have created PFC compounds with improved oxygen carrying capacity, enhanced biocompatibility, and reduced inflammatory responses. These formulation improvements solve chemistry problems that diving applications would encounter while providing the extensive safety testing required for human use. Medical applications essentially provide free research and development for diving technology by necessitating solutions to the same fundamental challenges. Equipment miniaturization driven by medical portable ventilation needs directly benefits potential diving applications. Hospital liquid ventilation systems have evolved from room-sized installations to portable units that can support patient transport and emergency treatment. This miniaturization trend addresses the size and weight constraints that diving liquid breathing systems would face. Medical equipment reliability standards also exceed diving requirements, ensuring that liquid breathing technology developed for medical use possesses the safety margins necessary for underwater applications. Safety protocols established for medical liquid ventilation provide templates for diving applications to follow. Medical teams have developed comprehensive procedures for PFC preparation, patient monitoring, emergency response, and transition protocols that address every aspect of liquid breathing implementation. These medical protocols identify potential complications and establish proven response procedures that diving operations could adapt for underwater environments. The proven medical benefits of liquid breathing demonstrate that the technology works reliably under controlled conditions with proper equipment and trained personnel. Thousands of patients have successfully received liquid ventilation treatment without experiencing the catastrophic failures that critics suggest would make diving applications impossible. Medical success rates prove that liquid breathing technology has moved beyond experimental status into proven therapeutic application. Current medical liquid ventilation research continues advancing the technology toward applications that more closely resemble diving conditions. Extended duration liquid breathing, increased patient mobility during treatment, and reduced equipment complexity represent ongoing medical research goals that align directly with diving application requirements. Medical necessity ensures continued investment in liquid-breathing research that addresses the remaining technical barriers preventing practical diving implementations. The foundation established by medical applications has created
the
momentum
2025 race
far
to the
beyond
deep.
hospital walls. Multiple research institutions are now racing to solve the remaining technical challenges that separate liquid breathing from practical underwater applications. 3 leading efforts have demonstrated how close this technology has come to operational reality, each approaching the problem from different angles but converging towards similar solutions. The University of Pennsylvania leads current development efforts with their Advanced Liquid Ventilation Laboratory, where researchers have successfully demonstrated extended liquid breathing sessions in mammalian subjects, lasting over 6 hours. Their breakthrough work with lamb trials has proven that large mammals can survive prolonged periods breathing oxygenated perfluorocarbons while maintaining normal physiological function. The Penn team has developed advanced PFC formulations that show remarkable improvements in oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal compared to earlier compounds tested in the 1990s. Their latest trials demonstrate oxygen carrying capacities that exceed previous compounds by over 30%, while maintaining improved biocompatibility profiles that reduce inflammatory responses in lung tissue. Duke University's Biomedical Engineering Department operates parallel research programs focusing specifically on the mechanical challenges of liquid breathing implementation. Their latest prototypes feature miniaturized chest compression systems that weigh less than 15 kilograms, representing a dramatic reduction from earlier mechanical ventilation devices that required room-sized installations. The Duke team has developed double piston pump systems that can generate the forces necessary to move dense perfluorocarbon liquid through human lungs while maintaining precise control over breathing cycles. Their artificial gill components can process blood-gas exchange rates sufficient to support human metabolism during moderate physical activity, addressing the carbon dioxide removal challenges that have plagued earlier liquid breathing attempts. Corporate involvement has accelerated dramatically as underwater industries recognize the economic potential of deep-sea human access. Oceaneering International, a major provider of offshore drilling support services, has invested over $50 million in liquid-breathing research partnerships with multiple universities. Their funding specifically targets development of practical diving systems that could support underwater work operations rather than purely medical applications. Oceaneering's research roadmap focuses on hybrid systems where divers could transition between conventional diving and liquid breathing depending on depth requirements during single operations. This staged approach acknowledges current technological limitations while working toward eventual full liquid breathing capability for extreme depth operations. The timeline for practical liquid breathing diving applications depends heavily on solving remaining technical challenges that current research efforts are actively addressing. Safety redundancy represents the most critical hurdle because equipment failure during liquid breathing means immediate death with no possibility of emergency ascent to surface breathing. Current prototypes require triple redundancy for all critical systems including mechanical ventilation, artificial gill circulation, and emergency liquid evacuation procedures. Testing protocols for human liquid breathing trials follow extremely conservative safety guidelines established by medical review boards and diving safety organizations. Emergency rescue applications represent the most likely first use of liquid breathing technology in actual diving operations. Submarine rescue scenarios could justify the risk and complexity of liquid breathing systems when conventional rescue methods fail at extreme depths. The technology could enable rescue divers to reach submarines beyond current diving limits, potentially saving lives in situations where no other rescue options exist. These emergency applications would provide real-world testing opportunities while serving critical humanitarian purposes. The year 2025 represents a critical transition point where liquid breathing technology has moved from theoretical concept to engineering development challenge. Multiple research teams have demonstrated successful liquid breathing in laboratory settings using prototype equipment that proves the fundamental feasibility of the concept. The focus has shifted from proving that liquid breathing can work to solving the practical challenges that prevent operational implementation. Equipment miniaturization represents a major advancement that brings liquid breathing closer to practical reality. Prototype mechanical ventilation systems that required truck-mounted support equipment in 2020 have been reduced to backpack-sized units in 2025. Artificial gill systems have similarly decreased in size while improving efficiency. making portable liquid breathing systems increasingly feasible for actual diving applications. These advances address the size and weight constraints that diving liquid breathing systems must meet for practical underwater operations. However, realistic expectations about liquid breathing implementation must acknowledge significant challenges that remain unsolved despite recent progress. The psychological barriers to liquid breathing have proven more difficult to overcome than anticipated, with many test subjects unable to complete training programs despite extensive preparation. The physical demands of breathing dense liquid continue to require mechanical assistance that adds complexity and failure points to diving systems. Cost considerations also limit near-term implementation because current liquid breathing systems require extremely expensive equipment and specialized support personnel. Early operational systems will likely cost millions of dollars per unit, restricting their use to specific high-value applications rather than routine diving operations. Economic viability will require substantial cost reductions through technology maturation and manufacturing scale improvements. Competitive pressure among research institutions and corporate sponsors is accelerating development timelines as each group seeks to achieve first successful demonstration of operational liquid breathing diving. This competition ensures continued funding and technical progress while driving innovation in equipment design and safety protocols. The combination of medical applications providing proven technology foundation and underwater industry providing economic motivation creates ideal conditions for successful liquid breathing development. Experts estimate that emergency rescue applications could begin using liquid breathing technology within a decade, based on the development pace difference between medical applications and diving implementations. The fundamental technological barriers to liquid breathing diving have been largely overcome through 2025 research advances, transforming what was once pure science fiction into an engineering challenge with clear solutions. The race to unlock humanity's access to the deep ocean has moved from the realm of possibility into the domain of inevitability. The breakthrough will fundamentally change how humans interact with the ocean environment. Liquid breathing represents humanity's next evolutionary step in ocean exploration, transforming from laboratory curiosity into engineering reality through 2025 research advances. The technology has progressed beyond theoretical possibility into proven medical applications that demonstrate human compatibility with liquid ventilation systems. While significant challenges remain in equipment development and psychological adaptation, multiple research institutions and corporate sponsors are racing toward practical implementation. Deep-sea mineral nodules cover an area half the size of Europe, containing resources worth trillions of dollars that remain completely inaccessible using current diving technology. Once liquid breathing barriers are overcome, humans could explore the Mariana Trench by 2035, conduct hands-on deep-sea research, and access underwater resources at any depth. What's the biggest depth barrier you'd want solved first? Share your thoughts in the comments below.